A new report outlines atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7th. The United States sinks 3 Houthi ships in the Red Sea, and you all are both more and less supportive of Israel than the general public. We ran some polls. We're going to take a look at that. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 11 a.m. Central on Monday, January 1st, 2024. So happy New Year. I'm starting my new year out with pink eye, thanks to the kiddo. So most of this video is going to be voiceover. Eyes looking a little rough. I feel good, but you don't need to look at that. So let's get into it. Starting out with a New York Times article. It's linked in the description below. Incredibly graphic. It's a hard read. If you think you've got the stomach for it, it's worth checking out. It's titled "Screams Without Words: How Hamas Weaponized Sexual Violence on October 7th." They say relying on video footage, photographs, GPS data from mobile phones, and interviews with more than 150 people, including witnesses, medical personnel, soldiers, and rape counselors, the Times identified at least 7 locations where Israeli women and girls appear to have been sexually assaulted or mutilated. Hamas put out a statement denying these allegations, saying, "Our resistance members are fighters for freedom and dignity. They would never commit such shameful acts. Our religion, values, and culture and societal norms don't accept these acts and don't tolerate them." We mentioned that there was not a single rape case filed in Palestinian courts in Gaza against any citizen. So I am hopeful that any organization, in this case the New York Times, before publishing something this explosive, has done their due diligence to make sure that it is factually correct. Just look, throughout history, the United States and elsewhere, during a time of war, both sides put out information designed to make the population hate the others. Right? In this case, this could be viewed as something designed to make Israelis or Israeli allies around the world hate Hamas, maybe even the Palestinians, and call for the removal of Gaza entirely. I mean, you can see, if you read this article, it should make you angry. It doesn't matter which side of anything you fall on, the acts that they are describing in this article should upset you. It should make you angry, and you can easily see how it moves from that into, we need to do something about this, we need to exact revenge, we need to X, Y, Z, and it just adds fuel to the fire. Again, this has been done throughout history, and when you look at historical examples, sometimes they're wholly made up. Other times they're exaggerated, and in plenty of cases, they're true. So you just have to keep that in mind. I, again, would give the article a read if you're at all interested in this. Again, it's pretty rough, pretty graphic. I didn't want to walk through some of the examples here, but keep in the back of your mind that topics like this have historically been used to inspire hatred in the middle of a conflict and rally a cause against the others. That doesn't mean, something to keep in mind as you're reading it, that, however, does not mean that these claims are false by any stretch. And then shifting down to the Red Sea, where the U.S. killed Houthi fighters for the first time ever, I think, in what might be another step up the escalation ladder. So U.S. Central Command put out that on December 31st, the container ship Hangzhou issued a second distress call in less than 24 hours, reporting being under attack by 4 Iranian-backed Houthi small boats. The small boats fired crew-served and small arms weapons at the Hangzhou, getting to within 20 meters and attempting to board it. A contract security team on board returned fire. Starting to see more of these commercial vessels bringing their own security on board just for this purpose. They say shortly thereafter, helicopters from the USS Eisenhower and USS Gravely responded to the distress call, and in the process of issuing verbal calls to the small boats opened fire on the U.S. helicopters with crew-served and small arms weapons. The U.S. Navy helicopters returned fire in self-defense, sinking 3 of the 4 small boats and killing the crews. The 4th boat fled the area. There was no damage to U.S. personnel or equipment. So the Houthis put out their own statement here. Worth noting, the Houthis are a group inside of Yemen. They do control a significant chunk of territory, well-armed, backed by the Iranians. There is, however, the official government of Yemen backed by or recognized by the international community. It gets a little confusing because in this Houthi statement, they refer to themselves as the Yemeni armed forces. So the Houthi statement said that while the naval forces of the Yemeni armed forces were exercising their regular official duties in establishing security and stability and protecting maritime navigation, in addition to performing their humanitarian and moral duty declared by Yemen to prevent Israeli ships or those heading to the ports of occupied Palestine from passing through the Red Sea, in solidarity and support for the Palestinian people, Americans attacked 3 boats belonging to the Yemeni naval forces, which led to the martyrdom and loss of 10 members of the naval forces. That was one sentence. That was tough to read. So then, according to the Houthis here, 10 of their members killed by U.S. forces. I got to call out that piece at the beginning where they say that they are doing their job to establish security and stability and protecting maritime navigation. Look, I understand that there's a lot of different ways you could view that, but they are bragging about striking commercial vessels with military weapons, drones and missiles. It's a hard stretch to take that to protecting maritime navigation. That's the opposite of protecting maritime navigation. But anyways, I think this is the first time that U.S. forces have directly killed Houthis in any engagement, which did not expect. There are a lot of areas we thought this escalation could have kicked off. Iran, either through their proxies in Syria or Iraq, Hezbollah, of course, up in Lebanon, did not expect that the first kind of, the U.S. has conducted strikes in Syria and Iraq, but this is significant. Then a graphic from Intel Schizo on Twitter put this together here, showing that over the course of the last just over a month, the U.S. has intercepted, U.S., British, and French naval vessels have intercepted 13 missiles, 60 drones, and now 3 Houthi ships, all in the Red Sea. So it's, again, I think a lot of people, myself included, expected that the U.S. response at some point here would be a strike, a missile strike of some sort against Houthi locations in Yemen, maybe where they're launching these drones from, or a drone storage site or missile storage site, something like that. Did not expect that it would be direct fire engagement between U.S. helicopters and Houthi naval vessels, small ships at it. Wasn't on the radar in 2023. Then shifting over to ground operations, looking at a couple of maps here from War Mapper on Twitter. Worth noting, the blue areas here are where Israel is operating, not necessarily cleared. Israel's been very, very careful to not refer to these areas as cleared of Hamas militants, simply showing these maps give you an idea of where they are and where they have yet to go. Also on this map, if you look at the west, kind of southwest corner of Gaza City, you'll see an area marked humanitarian safe zone. We've got a couple pictures of that to give you an idea of what that looks like right now. This is an area where the majority of the population across Gaza has fled to since the fighting kicked off. There still are some civilians up north in Gaza City. There's more down south around Khan Yunis, but much of the civilian population across Gaza has fled into a handful of these humanitarian safe zones, which are just people stacked on top of people with limited running water, limited medical supplies. There are constantly reports coming out of disease and sickness just spreading throughout these camps. Not a lot of running water, not a lot of food at times. Hygiene options are pretty limited. It's a lot of internally displaced people kind of shifted right on top of each other in these little camps. Now, Israel says that over the course of the past week, they've destroyed hundreds of tunnel shafts and eliminated dozens of Hamas operatives. A lot of the focus that we're seeing from Israel right now in terms of what they're releasing is showing the use of civilian infrastructure for Hamas military purposes, which I think we're going to see more of that going forward. If you think about it, what is going to change the perspective? What's going to change someone's perspective of the war? Is it 6 dead Hamas fighters? Not really. It's war. They're kind of expecting to see that. Maybe Hamas leadership. Israel is certainly targeting Hamas leadership. But if you see 1 or 2 battalion or brigade commanders killed, does that really change someone's perception of why Israel is fighting? Probably not. But civilian infrastructure, showing, in this case, we've got some videos of schools, of kindergartens housing weaponry, IEDs being placed inside some of these schools. We've got the next video, I'll show you tunnels connecting hospitals with schools. We've got another video of a drone flying in to show a tunnel inside of a mosque. This is a hot topic for the international community. We saw it a lot with Ukraine and Russia. People get fired up over that. Even the suggestion in Ukraine that Ukrainian air defense assets were somewhat near civilian residential buildings caused a firestorm. So when we start seeing more weapons and IEDs and munitions and tunnels in hospitals, mosques, schools, residential structures, I think that what Israel's doing, putting that information out there, is just trying to shift some of that perception for folks to recognize this is how Hamas operates. This is not a normal army. They are leveraging and in a sense, in a lot of ways, hiding behind the civilian population as they're carrying out this war. Now, the IDF also put out this video showing that they found, entered, and cleared a tunnel complex, again, connecting a school to a hospital. They put together this graphic. I like when they put these out. I think it's helpful to get an idea of the extent of the tunnel network and what IDF is up against as they move through Gaza. Now, in this footage, you can see the robot being used to go ahead of the forces to identify booby traps, tripwires, cameras, Hamas militants, maybe hostages. More on that in a second. And then eventually the IDF forces enter the tunnel and clear it on foot. And you can see just how dangerous this would be, right? And the hesitation, the reason this is taking so long is you step foot in that tunnel. If somebody on the other end of that sees you and opens fire, there's nowhere to go, right? You put enough lead down there, it's all of the rounds are just ricocheting in different directions. You're going to get killed, or at the very least, everybody's going to get hit. Like there's nowhere to hide when those rounds start flying, right? So the challenge that Israel has here is Hamas has been bragging for weeks now about detonating the entrances to some of these tunnels. As in, Israeli forces start to go into the tunnel, start to explore, start to investigate, boom, IED goes off, a charge goes off, collapses the tunnel in, maybe killing some of the Israeli soldiers. So they already have to worry about that. But they have to clear every single one of these tunnels, either with a dog, with a robot, or with soldiers, because every hostage, or a lot of the hostages that have been released so far, have talked about being held underground in some of these tunnel networks. So if Israel starts just dropping these tunnels on themselves, collapsing them as soon as they find them without searching them, it's entirely likely they could kill some of their own civilians in the process. So they have to go down there. Every single one of these tunnels has to be explored, and every one of these tunnels could be an absolute death trap the minute you step inside. Then shifting over to Hamas, they put out quite a bit of footage over the last few days. Most of it is kind of the standard Hamas footage at this point. Close range engagements with tandem charge RPGs, some small arms fire, a lot of rockets, a lot of mortars, things like that. But then there's this video I thought was worth showing, just show the nature of the fight and what Israel's up against in this war. You've got a Hamas militant exiting a tunnel within, 5-10 meters of an Israeli tank in broad daylight, pulling out a shape charge type IED, planting it on the side of the tank, running back into the tunnel as the thing detonates. We've seen more than one of these at this point, right? Just a video a couple days ago, or last week I think it was, showed a guy running out, same thing, in broad daylight, crossing the street, placing an IED on the side of the tank as it detonates. This is a challenge for Israel in a lot of ways, not just the tunnel network, but the fact that these guys are so committed to the cause that they're willing to run up against a tank in broad daylight with the hopes of destroying one vehicle. There's a lot of really nasty fighting still to be had. So we ran some polls here on YouTube a couple days ago, and we'll compare those with the sentiment from the U.S. general public. But I don't know, there's a million caveats I got to put on here. This is not scientific, like in any way. We got a lot more responses than the YouGov poll, but YouTube takes those polls and sends them out like a piece of content. So it just goes to anybody generally interested in these subjects. It does not go exclusively to subscribers to this channel, does not go exclusively to people who have viewed my content. It's not just in the United States. It goes out globally. Also, I don't have any demographic data. I don't have any data here other than the number of likes, the number of votes, and the vote results. So take it all with a grain of salt, but I do think it's always interesting to kind of see some comparisons as best we can. So starting out, the first one, how important a goal for the U.S. should it be to protect Israel? Here on YouTube, 40,000 people voted. 57% said it was important, 38% said not important, and 5% said not sure. I'm comparing these results with a poll done on YouGov, by YouGov, from 16 to 18 December of 1,500 U.S. citizens. So we blew their sample size out of the water, right? We won, is all that's important here. So the YouGov poll, 64% said it's important for the U.S. to protect Israel, 17% said not important, and 20% said not sure. So again, you're going to see more of the not sure across the board because they're just like, if you don't really know the answer here on YouTube or don't have an opinion, people just scroll past it. But when you're in the middle of a survey and you have to answer the question, people have to select that not sure. So in this one, if I have to read that, I would say the audience, the general public, is more supportive of Israel. 64% to 57% think that it's important for the U.S. to protect Israel. But the bigger one there is 38% of you all say it's not important for the U.S. to protect Israel against 17% of the general public. I thought that was interesting. Pretty big difference, right? But that big difference is not always the case. There's one of these, I think it's the last one we'll touch on, where it's essentially the same. The next question was, would you support or oppose Israel and Hamas agreeing to a ceasefire now? There were no terms laid out in that one, right? Just straight up, ceasefire now, yes or no? On YouTube, 34,000 votes, 47% support a ceasefire right now, 37% oppose, 16% not sure. On YouGov, 63% support a ceasefire right now, 17% oppose, 20% not sure. So that's kind of tracks with a poll we asked not too long ago, same general question. And we saw a lot more a lot more opposition to a ceasefire on this channel than in the general public. So I think this is why I thought these polls are so interesting, is that first one there's far less overt support for Israel. People saying it's not the most important thing not important for the United States to protect Israel. But then you come down to the next one about a ceasefire, and generally speaking, the argument right now is that a ceasefire would benefit Hamas. So you kind of use that when looking at these numbers. The oppose number tends to be more pro-Israel. The support number, I would not say is pro-Hamas, but not the overtly pro-Israel, maybe is the way to put that. Then the last one here, do you think Israel is engaging in indiscriminate bombing in Gaza? Now, this question was asked because it wasn't very long ago, U.S. President Biden used a term where he said, quote, they're starting to lose that support, Israel, talking about the international support, by indiscriminate bombing that takes place. So this wasn't just like pulled out of nowhere by the poll. It's because President Biden said that. It caused a lot of problems, or there's a lot of backlash from folks in Israel when that came out. So they asked that question. Do you think Israel is engaging in indiscriminate bombing in Gaza? On YouTube, 31,000 votes, 43% said yes, 45% said no, and then 12% not sure. So like pretty even, all things considered. And that is exactly what we saw on YouGov, very, very close. On YouGov, 33% said yes, 32% said no, and 35% said not sure. That's a coin toss, right? When you're at like the 1 percentage point, if I grab this poll 30 minutes later, it might be back to even or flip-flop. And that's how close this is. I thought that was interesting. So that the view of indiscriminate bombing in Gaza, the people voting here on YouTube are more aware of the conflict. They're more confident in their decision is my take on this. And they're more confident in saying yes or saying no. There's 12% not sure versus 35% essentially didn't vote in the YouGov poll. So more of you voted. More of you were confident in your assessment that Israel is or is not. But it seems, again, it's like a 50-50 toss-up of those who voted. Again, some of these polls, there's a lot of difference. But other ones like this one, it's essentially right in line with the general public. I don't know. I don't know what you take away from that. I think it's interesting. But that's all I got for now. Hope your new year is off to a great start. All my best to you and yours. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.